So let's do, we've somehow managed to make it an hour without doing Web3 and what you're up to today. So you now have a new company in the broader ad tech Web3 world.
So you've caught me unprepared because yes, a round has mostly closed, but I actually haven't publicly announced it. So I guess this is the official.
Yeah, good.
This is
You went on Rogan, then you came on here, equally big platforms, podcasts, I know you were debating which one to launch the company on, but
yeah, no, clearly that, but I obviously chose Logan for
yeah, exactly.
Yep.
However much you can talk about, or you're comfortable talking about the company specifically, or what led you into Web3. You obviously have a pretty good understanding of how the Web2 world works, at least these social media giants. And you guys, the two of you have had some, I think either good sport or snippy, depending on, people's view back and forth about some of this stuff. So what led you down the path to it? And what do you kind of believe about Web3?
Yeah, so I was not an early crypto adopter. I think like everyone in Web3, there's like the one that got away. There was like a super crypto bull at Facebook when I was there, and he like told me to buy Bitcoin. I think when it was like at $10 or something. And I remember at the time, Coinbase limited your purchases to like $100 or something. And so like, and I just didn't want to deal with the hassle of like buying Bitcoin. And so I didn't buy as much as I should have. So there's definitely a little bit of a FOMO feeler around.
You wait long enough though, it could be back. You could get another $10 opportunity.
The market will fluctuate, as you say. But no, I guess I got kind of sort of crypto pilled by some big names and VCs in crypto today that I just know more personally than anything else. And they got me thinking about it. And I basically asked myself two questions. One, what in Web 2 could actually be defensively rebuilt along sort of crypto blockchain lines? Like starting from zero, what would you rebuild along those lines? And then two, looking at Web 3, what is completely and totally missing from this world that should exist? And the answer to both questions was the same, which is attribution, which if you're not familiar, I know it sounds very wonky and almost academic. It's a technology that more or less gets telemetry from the user touch points, like the ad click, the ad view, you installed the app, you did this thing in the app, you didn't do this thing in the app, you disappeared. And you sort of thread it together into a causal chain out of the chaos of data that's hitting you. And you figure out, aha, it turns out, because, life on the internet is complicated. You see a YouTube video and you see an 8 Sleep ad, because I just see 8 Sleep ads all the time, right? You read an interview with Matteo about it, and then at some point you buy the damn thing. And so it's like, okay, phenomenologically, how did causally I get to the point where I bought this like cooled mattress thing? It's like, well, was it the video? Was it this? Was it the billboard? Was it something else? And so attribution is what helps you solve that problem. And if you look at attribution platforms like my former employer, Branch, or other ones like AppFlyer, Adjust, whatever, it's got competitors. They effectively function as kind of, semi-public, somewhat decentralized ledgers, right? They're a central point. They're sort of a database that says, well, you know what? This got 4 impression views on Facebook and 5 video views on YouTube and this other thing. And then this other thing happened. And this is how we think the causal chain held together, at least in theory. In actual practice, it's a lot less subtle and complex than that for a bunch of reasons that probably not worth going into here. But that's what I thought was kind of interesting. And so it's probably no secret. I've been publishing on Substack about Web3 ideas and attribution and what would an ad stack on Web3 look like? Well, big reveal, that's actually what we're working on. So that those two posts are basically the VC pitch that I raised on in essay form.
Is the idea as like people's Web3 interactions, if you will, happen on like different chains and different platforms, and like how do you find the same human, or is what we believe might be the same human across these? Is that the kind of like the general theme?
That's one of the challenges. I mean, identity is fragmented on Web3. I mean, it is on Web2 as well. When we started Facebook Exchange, we discovered that every Facebook user ID had an average of 4 devices. And this was like 2013. It's probably even higher now. And so identity is very fragmented, which makes attribution and targeting very difficult. So that's definitely one of the challenges, Zach. But more broadly, like, let's just think about what's a basic question a Web3 company would ask themselves, right? Like, Web3 already has ads, by the way, if you define ads loosely enough. So like an NFT.
Well, the first thing I would probably ask myself is, what am I doing here? And is anyone actually going to buy this? But after I get through that question, I convince myself there's something here. Go on.
Okay, but what's question number 2 or 3? Question number 2 or 3 would be, what's my retention rate? What is the ROI on that token drop that I just did, right? Or that liquidity, providing bonus that I gave you for, injecting liquidity into my decentralized exchange, right? What is the ROI on that? What are my CACs? Let's say I have a conventional Web2 ads buy for some Web3 game. What was the acquisition cost? What was the long-term, what was the actual long-term monetization? You can't answer those questions right now with the tooling there is no tooling basically in Web3. And so the most basic metrics are basically unanswerable questions right now.
Is that because you show an ad in, I hate the term web too, because it's really like the web. You show an ad on the web and then somebody comes and has like an interaction in the app, the decentralized game, let's call it as the example. It's a good one. Like I've got to link those two events, if you will, like the history of the events together and do some sort of like data science-y work on I did A, did B, that's the theme.
Yeah. There's a total identity. You mentioned ATT earlier, right? The example of Apple basically turning off the device ID for third-party advertisers on the iPhone. Why does that matter? Well, identity is the primary key that everyone in this kind of fragmented right ecosystem use to refer to each other to calculate things like ROIs, right? And if that doesn't exist or if that's fragmented, then it's very difficult to do that. And then and this isn't by design, it's two different forms of the web interacting with each other. How do you sync that Facebook, campaign ID or that web browser cookie with the wallet that 2 months later actually bought the NFT? There's no way to actually systematically join that.
I cannot believe I'm going to say this out loud, but that's actually like a pretty good startup idea. Like,
there's space in the round. There's space in the round. We'll let in a little friends and family check. I'd be proud to have the biggest Web3 troll in the round.
Well, let me tell
ultimate victory.
Let me tell you why I like it, because everybody always thinks I hate everything, and it's like I don't hate everything because I hate it. Like, I am a startup person. All I do is actually like put money in high risk technology stuff. Like, if anything, I'm probably like one of the people who likes these kind of like cockamamie ideas more than anyone else. I just don't like when they're not based in logic and reality and like human behavior. But here, what you've got, which I agree with, like with one giant caveat, is like common advertising and usage metrics and dashboards for a company that operates in Web3, because like the underlying data that they have in their normal web environment is different, right? It's a different set of like interaction points. The way the data is captured is different. The way you have to do analytics on it is different. And most of these companies are too busy trying to figure out a business model to actually do the underlying like analytics work themselves. And so there's your gap. I think that's right. Like, it makes a ton of sense because it's not our frame at Operator when we do investing in technology, in crypto, whatever, is like, does this make sense as an enterprise software company? And it has nothing to do with like web, would this be an enterprise software that a company would buy? And it does make sense to me that a Web3 customer would pay for this because they are unlikely to be able to build this internally unless they were really, really big.
That's exactly right, Zach.
Yeah.
And I think it's well timed, right? Because crypto winter has shown us that token does not always go up. And a lot of these products were actually sort of Ponzi schemes or speculative vehicles. But and again, who cares about your CAC if money is free and token always go up? But when suddenly token doesn't always go up, you have to worry about acquisition costs and unit economics. And so this is an engine to actually measure that and hopefully create like an actual legit user acquisition machine for.
Yeah, no, I think it makes a ton of sense. Obviously, my main concern with the whole business is like, do you have customers in 5 years? Because the vast majority of them do feel like Ponzi schemes are race to the. It's not even. I hate the term Ponzi scheme because it always makes you sound like Mel Gibson in Conspiracy or whoever. Was it Mel? I think it was Mel Gibson who was in. Who was the guy who was in Conspiracy who ended up being right? Not a movie. Anyway, like, you always sound crazy when you say Ponzi scheme, but in reality, I think of it more as like, is there a fundamental underlying business model that has like long-term sustainable value? And I think actually one of the really fascinating questions for a lot of these Web3 customers is this whole idea of like, are my users actually my users, right? Are they here for the early access to the coin and they jump? How long do they stay? Are they actually just like in the Philippines, basically like skipping from game to game to be able to be the early ones in action? Yeah, there's a lot of like fundamental user metric questions that I think don't have the typical like web oriented analytics, like, because you're used to users who show up because they want to buy the product as opposed to users who show up because they want to speculate on the money.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think that's one of the lessons from the play to earn model, right? If the game isn't actually worth playing, then people are just sticking around for the money.
Shocking. You're telling me if you build a product that people don't actually like to use, it doesn't work. That's so weird. In the long run, it just goes to zero.
I mean, the weird thing here is that if you think about Web 2 and Web 3, right, the reason why it's so mind bending is that so many things about Web 3 are like literally the reverse of Web 2, right? So like Web 2, you would find some viral consumer use case that took off like fucking crazy, and then you'd have to scale infrastructure really quickly and find a business model that actually paid for it, right? Like as late as like literally at the IPO at Facebook, the ad system at Facebook still kind of sucked, right? And the CPMs that we were driving did not justify the valuation at all, right? And the only reason some, little dinky product manager like me could raise his hand and say, hey, we should build a real-time bidded exchange is because everyone was so desperate to drive revenue that they're like, we'll try anything. Here's 3 engineers, build it. You've got a year to scale it to $1 billion.
Well, you knew that business model was coming, right? Because we've known that we can monetize eyeballs since we invented the newspaper, basically. I mean, we didn't know exactly how we were going to monetize the eyeballs. That I understand and I totally agree with. But this idea of like, you have people's attention in a consistent way, you know something about them, like, yeah, you're going to be able to show them ads. Now, is it going to be worth whatever the like average revenue per user Facebook has today? Like, no, I think everybody got that wrong, myself included. You just assumed it was going to look something like a display ad, and it turns out it's worth way, way more than that. But the simpleness of it, of I show an ad to somebody while I have their attention, that I think people understood. I just don't think they understood the magnitude of it.
Maybe. Look, I mean, the CPMs when I joined Facebook were 17 cents. Right. And so
And what are they now? Just order of magnitude?
It's dollars, probably. In the
Yeah.
US, it's several dollars. Probably,
Yeah.
which is high. But just to contextualize a little bit, Zach, I spent a year, I was basically given a mandate. You own the targeting system, take user data and turn it into money. And we literally took every piece of Facebook-owned user data, getting back to the microphone question, right? And none of it really moved the needle, at least used in a very direct way of like, oh, target, a link a user shared, and like shit, like the most simplistic low-level stuff just did not work. It did not increase monetization at all. And so after a year of that, we were like tearing our hair out and not understanding what, and of course the key was, I think kind of maybe where you're hinting at, which is it turns out the first party data from REI or Home Depot or Victoria's Secret or Sephora, that's the valuable stuff that'll, and then also just remember, Facebook ads used to be that little shitty postage stamp size thing on the right. Like newsfeed ads were already like a risky, edgy thing that Zuck might have said no to, right? And once you had the targeting, once you had the media experience, then yes, then now we're at the ARPUs we have today. But it seemed a little, I mean, dude, even scaling, just to nerd out ad tech wise for a second. Again, we're running this exchange. Like you said, there was so much hubbub around it. And I bring in like everyone in ad tech, everyone that ran every DSP, everything. And they'd come in expecting it would be this massive, like showed up with their entire teams, 15 people, and it would be like me. And I take them to the thing and it's like, all right, you see these fucking 3 boneheads right here? This is it. This is the real-time media team at Facebook. And they're like, no, you're joking. Where's the real team? It's like, no. This is it, bro. This is it. This is what you're working with. And so, that's how dicey it was at the time. And the adoption friction was enormous. Just changing, now everyone talks about native ad formats. At the time, that was kind of unheard of. If it wasn't a 300 by 250 pixel thing or a 728 by 90, they're like, get the fuck out of here. We're not going to, And so you could not convince them to spend money on Facebook, even with the CPMs on the floor with 1 billion users. It was hard. It was a hard sell.